My name is Derek and I'm 25. And back in February of 2023, I was working the overnight shift at a gas station off Route 9 outside Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was the kind of job where you'd go a full hour without seeing a single car pull in. And I'd spend most of the night restocking the cooler or watching whatever was playing on the little TV propped up behind the register. I'd taken the job, mainly because it paid a couple dollars more than anything else I could find, and the manager who trained me made it sound like nothing ever happened out there worth worrying about, and for the first month, that's exactly how it went. Sometime around 1 a.m. on a Thursday, a guy came in and bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum, and didn't say much, and I didn't think anything of it because plenty of truckers and shift workers came through at odd hours just like I did. He came back the next night around the same time and bought almost the exact same thing, and I figured he probably worked somewhere nearby and this was just part of his routine, same as mine. He came back a third night too, and this time he didn't buy anything at all and just stood near the coffee machine for a long while looking around the store before he walked back out to his car without a word. I told myself he was probably just killing time before a shift started somewhere down the road, since plenty of people did that in a 24-hour store with nowhere else open, and I went back to restocking without giving it much more thought. It was maybe 2 nights after that when I noticed his car parked at the far edge of the lot for almost 40 minutes without him ever coming inside, and when I looked out through the window, I could see him just sitting there in the driver's seat, facing the store, and not doing anything else that I could tell. I called my manager on his cell even though it was almost 3 a.m. because something about it had started sitting wrong with me in a way I couldn't fully explain, and he told me to lock the front door if I felt like I needed to, and to call the police if the guy didn't leave within a few minutes. I locked the door and stood back near the office, where I could still see the lot through the security monitor, and about 10 minutes later the guy got out of his car and walked straight up to the front door and pulled on the handle hard enough that I heard it rattle all the way from where I was standing. He pulled on it 2 more times and then started knocking on the glass, and I didn't move and didn't say anything back to him, even though I could hear my own heartbeat over the hum of the coolers, and I already had 911 dialed on my phone with my thumb over the call button. He stepped back from the door after the 3rd round of knocking and looked directly at the camera above the entrance for a few seconds before walking back to his car and driving off without ever saying a single word through all of it. I called the police anyway and gave them his plate number off the security footage, and an officer told me the next day that the car came back registered to a man with 2 prior charges for casing convenience stores in the area before actual break-ins at 2 other locations that same year, and that my calling it in early was probably the only reason nothing worse happened at mine. I still lock that door the second the clock hits 1 a.m. now, no matter how many times my manager tells me it's probably overkill. I'm Marissa and I'm 29, and in September of 2021 I picked up a few overnight shifts at a gas station just off the interstate outside Amarillo, Texas, covering for a coworker who'd gone on leave, and it wasn't my usual store, so I didn't know the layout or the quirks of the place the way I knew my regular location. The station sat almost by itself out there, with a truck stop across the road and not much else around for miles, and the overnight manager walked me through everything on my first night, including where the cameras were and which one covered the restroom hallway around back. That camera turned out to be the one thing that didn't actually work, even though a little red light on it made it look like it did, and I only found that out because I asked about it directly after noticing the monitor never showed anything from that angle, no matter what happened back there. The manager told me it had been broken for months, and corporate kept saying they'd send someone out to fix it and never did. And since nothing had ever happened back there, he didn't seem too concerned about it either. For the first 2 weeks, nothing about that blind spot bothered me, since the restroom hallway barely got used at 3 a.m. anyway, and I mostly forgot the camera was even broken. It was on a Tuesday night that I noticed the restroom door was locked from the inside for almost 25 minutes, even though I hadn't seen anyone walk back there, and hadn't sold a key to anyone either, since we kept the key behind the counter and logged who took it. I figured a trucker from across the road must have slipped in through the back exterior door. We sometimes propped open for airflow, and I didn't think much more of it until the door finally opened, and a man I didn't recognize walked out and left through the front without buying anything or saying a word. I checked the exterior door afterward and found the little chain lock on it had been snapped clean off, and there was nothing I could do to secure it properly until morning, so I pushed a stack of empty crates against it instead and kept glancing toward that hallway for the rest of the night. Around 4:30, I heard the exterior door creak again, even with the crates against it, and I grabbed the store phone and called the police non-emergency line instead of going to check myself, since nothing about that broken lock or that empty restroom felt like something I wanted to handle alone. A deputy showed up within about 15 minutes and found the same man from earlier sitting on the floor of the restroom with a backpack full of items that still had our price tags on them, along with tools that looked like they were meant for prying open the register drawer if he ever got the chance. He told the deputy he'd been using that same blind exterior door for weeks to slip in and out whenever the overnight clerk was busy up front, and that he'd been planning to try the register once he found a night the store stayed empty long enough. Corporate finally sent someone out to fix that camera within 2 days of the report, going in which everyone at the store found darkly funny given how long they'd ignored it before. I check that exterior door and that restroom key log now before I do anything else at the start of every single shift I pick up out there. My name's Tyler and I'm 22. And back in April of 2022, I was working overnight at a small gas station in rural Ohio, about 20 minutes outside Zanesville. And it was the kind of station where the owner still counted the drawer himself every morning and expected everything to line up exactly right down to the penny. I liked the quiet of it, honestly, since it gave me time to study for community college classes between customers, and most nights maybe a dozen cars came through, total between midnight and 6, which left plenty of dead time at the counter. About 3 weeks into the job, I noticed the drawer coming up a few dollars short almost every single morning. And at first I figured I was just making small mistakes giving change, since I was still fairly new to actually running a register on my own overnight without anyone looking over my shoulder. The owner mentioned it to me directly after about a week of it happening, and I told him I'd start double counting every transaction and paying closer attention, and for a few nights after that, the drawer actually did come up right. Then The shortages started again, except now they were bigger, sometimes $10 or $15 at a time, and I knew for a fact I hadn't made that many mistakes. Since I'd started counting so carefully, I was practically triple checking myself with every customer. I started reviewing the security footage myself before the owner even asked me to, since I wanted to rule myself out completely and prove the mistake wasn't mine. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't caught before during any of my shifts. There were a few seconds on the footage almost every single night around 4 a.m. where the picture would freeze for just a moment before jumping forward like a skipped frame. And each time that happened, it lined up almost exactly with a shortage the next morning. I mentioned it to the owner and he pulled up the same clips and agreed something wasn't right about that footage and told me not to say anything to anyone else while he figured out what he wanted to do about it. 2 nights later, he had a friend of his who worked in IT come look at the system directly, and they found a small device wired into the DVR box in the back office that was designed to freeze and loop a few seconds of footage on command from somewhere else entirely. And it turned out the assistant manager from the day shift had installed it himself so he could slip into the office and skim cash straight from the safe drop bag. During the hours, he knew I'd be up front working the register and wouldn't notice him in back. He'd been doing it for months across multiple stores he'd worked at before this one, according to what came out afterward. And he was arrested within the week once the owner brought in an actual detective to look at the wiring and the timestamps together. I still count that drawer twice every single night before I close it out, even though I know now it was never actually me making those mistakes at all.